Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be going over some application type questions for ratios on page 15 and 16 in your guided notes, and then number 5 on page 19. So this first question on page 15 says the ratio of the number of teeth on a bicycle on the front gear, so those are like those pokey parts, to the number of teeth on the rear gear is 11 to 15. If a bicycle has 22 teeth on the front gear, how many teeth are on the rear gear? So basically what this question is we're going to solve for a missing value in an equivalent ratio, but this time it's just in a context. Okay, so it's what we were doing on pages 9, 10, 11 in your guided notes, but now we have a context to it. So whenever I get a question like this, the first thing I do is I label the parts of the ratio. So if I go back to the explanation, it says the ratio of the number of teeth on a bicycle on the front gear to the number of teeth on the rear gear. So that means front gear is going to be 11, right? Because it's always in order. And then rear gear is 11. So what I would do is I would just write FG for front gear and then rear gear, RG for 15. Okay, this way I can keep my ratio straight. So then it says if the bicycle has 22 teeth on the front gear, so equals, right? I'm just setting up an equivalent ratio, equals blank to blank. 22 teeth on the front gear. Well, the front gear is on the left side of the ratio, so that means 22 is going to go here. How many are on the rear gear? So question mark. So this is how I would set my equivalent ratio up. And then I would also label this front gear. So now you're just doing what we were doing before. So you're comparing the numbers on the same side, so left side, and you would just ask yourself, well, if you went from 11 to 22, what would you do? What operation? So smaller to bigger, which is multiply, and 11 times 2 is 22. So if I multiply this side by 2, well, what do I need to do to this side? Also multiply by 2. So 15 times 2 is 30. So this would answer the question. There would be 30 teeth on the rear gear if there's 22 on the front. Okay, this question here is a multiple choice question. So I just labeled these as people because it photocopied kind of dark. So basically this is a table and then there's a bunch of chairs around the table, but only 4 of the chairs have people in them. So if we were counting how many chairs, there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so there's 10 total chairs and then there's 4 people in the chairs. So the question says, what is the ratio of chairs to people? So we just said, well, there's 10 chairs and there's 4 people. So at first glance, it seems, okay, pretty easy. The answer 10 to 4 hopefully is one of the choices, but when I look, it's not. Okay, so sometimes these questions are given to us where the answer is actually an equivalent ratio to the obvious one that we count. So in our options here, we have to look for what's a ratio that's equal to 10 to 4. So there should be a few options we can get rid of right away, because if the left side's bigger, it can't just all of a sudden be smaller than the right side. So I should immediately be able to cross off A and B. So now I'm left with 2 choices. So is 10 to 4 equal to 5 to 2 or 5 to 4? Well, remember, to get an equal ratio, you either multiply both sides by 2 or divide. And since both of these are smaller, I know I'm dividing. So if I divide both of these sides by 2, I will end up with a 5 to 2 ratio. Okay, making the correct answer for this question, C. So make sure you identify that in your guided notes. Okay, this question, which of the following diagrams represents a 3 to 2 ratio of triangles to squares? And then it says, hint, think equivalent ratio. So it looks like we're going to be doing something similar to the chair question we just did. So let's start off with A, and let's just count the triangles and the squares. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 triangles, and it looks like 4 squares, right? 6 triangles, 4 squares. Okay, I'm going to go to B. How many triangles? 6 triangles, I count, and 5 squares. C, I've got 2 triangles and 3 squares, it looks like. Yep. And then the last one, I've got 3 triangles and 4 squares. So again, after doing the obvious count, none of them have 3 triangles when I count and 2 squares. So that must mean that the answer is actually an equivalent one. Okay, so you would go through each of these and you would see what can you do to 3 to 2 to end up with an equivalent? Well, the most obvious thing we can start with is multiplying both sides by 2, right? And when we do that, we end up with a 6 to 4 ratio, which means that A would be the correct answer here. The most common mistake that students make on a question like this is they don't see the obvious answer, so then they just say, oh, it must be C, because, well, 3 to 2 and 2 to 3 are pretty close. But remember, we can't just flip a ratio. Okay, it's not the same thing. So please don't do that. If you don't see the obvious answer, you need to look for an equivalent one. Okay, and then the top of page 19, number 5. So it says, according to Harper, to make 3 perfect smoothies, you need to have 15 strawberries. For how many strawberries will Harper need to make 27 smoothies for our class party? Hint, set up an equivalent ratio and solve for the unknown. Okay, so this sounds very similar to the bite question. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write out my ratio and I'm going to label it. 3 smoothies, 15 strawberries. So I'm going to label it smoothies and strawberries. Okay, equals blank to blank. 27 smoothies. So again, if smoothies is on the left side over here, it needs to be on the right side over here. So 27 smoothies. And then I'm trying to solve for strawberries, so question mark. Okay, so now, again, we know how to do this. We're just solving for a missing value. So 3 and 27 are on the same side, so I'm going to compare those. Well, if you went from 3 to 27 smoothies, you're increasing how many times? 3 multiplied by what is 27? Well, the answer is 9. If I multiply the smoothies by 9, that means I need to also multiply my strawberries by 9, or they're not going to end up being very strawberry-y. I think that's a word. So 15 times 9, 10 times 9 is 90. 9 times 5 is 45. Again, I don't expect you to do this in your head, but you've just got to set it up over here then, okay? So 9 times 5 is 45, carry the 4. 1 times 9 is 9, plus 4 is 13. So 135 would end up going here. Okay, so how many strawberries if you're making 27 smoothies? 135. Okay, so when you get questions like this, don't be intimidated. Just slow down, set up your equivalent ratios, label them, and then solve.